everyone and welcome to another video. Today I want to compare NieR Replicant version 1.2 to NieR Automata or NieR Automata, whichever one you prefer. The main reason I'm making this video is primarily because the most comparison videos that you see between the two, or NieR Gestalt versus Replicant, is usually just graphics, and most people don't go into details about the characters or story or anything like that. So I decided to take upon the challenge of doing this myself. I do want to start by saying that I have only played NieR Replicant version 1.2. I didn't play the original Gestalt, but I have played NieR Automata twice. I played the original vanilla version of NieR Automata in 2018, meaning that this is the second time that I am playing through Automata again. With that all said, let's get into the comparison. Both NieR games have fantastic stories that are extremely well thought out and relatively emotional for various different reasons. Replicant has you play as a young boy that you can provide the name for. We're going to call him NieR for the sake of simplicity, trying to cure his sister Yona, who has fallen ill throughout the story. NieR develops relationships with characters such as Kaine, Emil, and Weiss. Going into detail pretty much any further would spoil most of the game. I'll get into more on that later on. Automata follows two androids named 2B and 9S, tasked to eliminate and kill machine life forms during the 14th Machine War and preserve Earth for when the remaining humans eventually return from the moon. I know both plots sound incredibly different from each other, but they are vaguely connected as is, which isn't that surprising considering that Yoko Taro doesn't really connect most of his games anyway, considering that NieR is a spin-off of the original Drakengard. Replicant story-wise is very simple until you play Route B. Both NieR games ask that you play each route to fully understand the story. In the case of Replicant, it does a poor job at making Route A to D enjoyable because you'll be playing the same 5 to 6 endgame missions 3 to 4 times with little variation between Route B to D. The way Replicant delivers its story through certain big plot points only being relegated to multiple pages of text is also really questionable. Kaine and Emil backstories are literally only elaborated through walls of text. On the note of Kaine and Emil, they are probably the most well-known characters from the cast of Replicant. Kaine because of her excessive swearing, and Emil because of his charming and caring attitude, although he is put through hell in Replicant and Automata. Grimoire Weiss is also a central character, but he doesn't really get as much development as Kaine and Emil, which is fine because his story is to act as NieR's right hand anyway, and since he's voiced by Gara, he's pretty cool.
Last time, my name is Grimoire Weiss, and it is not to be abbreviated.
Weiss!
Good to see you, Kaine. Although I don't think anyone has ever accused me of being a little bitch before. And you, we meet again.
Weiss, you okay?
I believe I could ask you the same question right now.
Replicant also has Yona, who's obviously the person you're trying to save, but she barely gets any screen time and is absent for the second half of the game, and the two twins, Devla and Popola, require you to play all the way to the end of Route A to get any background on them, and the small bit of more information you get is locked to Route C through, I believe, 3 cutscenes. The character of NieR is also a solid protagonist, but falls short of characters like Devla and Popola, and is once again only fleshed out in side content, where you learn a lot more about Brother NieR and even Father NieR. By side content, I mean the CD dramas and the novels. The best example of this would be the fact that Brother NieR keeps his hair tied because he offered himself as a prostitute. The client constantly pulled his hair, and so he keeps his hair tied back. As innocent as NieR appears in the main game of Replicant, he's pretty fucked up. The purpose he sees for himself for living is because he thinks that he needs to be alive for only Yona. Means that he gives away his opportunities to have love and friends. The main villain, Shadow Lord, is also interesting, but he is pretty much a spoiler in his own right. Now I know it sounds like I love shitting on Replicant, but the small main cast already helps its story way more than Automata's slightly bigger cast in my opinion. This game has what I'm going to call is the Persona 5 effect, where the characters carry this game. The banter is memorable and on par with the amazing characterization of Final Fantasy XV's main cast. Although the story in part 1 isn't amazing, it's memorable because of how much time you spend with the main cast. The side quests in Replicant all pretty much boil down to fetch quests, but the best thing about that is that almost every quest has unique dialogue between each party member. That's not saying all the side quests are bad, but most of them are pretty mundane. But when cool ones show up, like the fisherman being an assassin, a dog looking for their owner's medicine, or a whole ass demon ex machina quests that are insanely memorable. And don't forget about the incredible lighthouse lady quest line. That's the only quest that I can say that I highly recommend that you play, even if that's the only one you do. So when a main character is hurt or break down, you instantly care because of the time you spent with them. Automata doesn't have this luxury for reasons I'll get into later, but Replicant characters are all likable because they are charming without forcing it, aka Abby from The Last of Us Part 2.
These people use the same mask for life.
Beats me. Maybe they wash them.
Still more hygienic than a bundle of paper stuck in the same shitty cover for life.
There is nothing more filthy than your underwear, hussy.
What, this? I don't wear the same one all the time. I have a different set for every day of the week. And every night, I scrub them with soap and water. So you can bet your ass I'm cleaner than you.
My word.
It's paying a lot of money for us to go find some old cooking knife.
Whether for love of food or fine cutlery, there is little doubt this man is a serious customer.
Maybe we could buy a whole bunch of knives for him. Then we'd be rich.
If he had 20 arms and could wield a weapon in each one, I am certain he would purchase a great many knives for himself.
That would be awesome!
Guys, this is a really stupid conversation.
That man simply hops from one woman to the next, does he not?
He's been cheating this whole time? That's just terrible.
Doubtless he will end up suffering at the hands of one of his paramours sooner or later.
I don't think he means any harm. This kind of thing just happens with attractive guys.
That's awful! What if a man did that to you, Kaine?
He'd wake up a little less man than he used to be.
Change my mind. Cheating is always wrong.
With that being said, I do want to talk about the gameplay, which is easily the weakest part, and kind of the strongest part of Replicant. Since I'm referring to Replicant version 1.2 and not 2010's Gestalt, the gameplay saw a nice upgrade, but nothing too crazy. The game can be a grind for more reasons than one, primarily because you unlock fast travel until the last 6 hours of the game. You want to kill enemies for XP, but you've already ran through the zone like 5 times. And this becomes a constant problem in Replicant. Since I got all the trophies on Replicant and Automata, I can't tell you how annoying it is to sit and watch a flower grow for 4 days in real time and running through the same area for 2 hours just to get one part or piece of material to drop. Thankfully, unlike Automata, Replicant plays around with its camera a lot more during gameplay. The game legit turns into Resident Evil 1 Spencer Mansion 1 second, then throws a storybook at you that you can't cheat on until the later half of the game or anything like that. It's crazy to think that so much time went into making NieR feel unique, but since the gameplay is so repetitive, it doesn't feel very unique to play. Now, I'm going to say that Replicant does have a second playable character throughout its 40-hour campaign. It gets an extra ending where you do play as a new character. The problem that I have with the new character that is added is that you only get to play with them for all of an hour and 30 minutes. I understand that they didn't remake the full game, but the fact that they have a fully new playable character program and has so little playtime makes me wish we could switch party members. Before I jump into Automata, I do want to talk about both scores for each game. The music in Replicant is godly and arguably better than Automata's. The problem with the OST is that it can get pretty repetitive even if you're not grinding for anything, but when they do use tracks and remixes, it hits so much harder. Honestly, both NieR games OSTs are amazing and some of the best in the industry. Which game you prefer is definitely up to preference. Replicant goes for more of an orchestra and ambient sounding score, while Automata plays with techno and more bass-heavy orchestra instruments. I think the problem that I have with Replicant overall is the fact that Replicant doesn't really utilize its gameplay as much, and since it's not a full-blown remake, it definitely holds the game back. If NieR were just a novel or something, it'd definitely be better in Automata and story, but when the gameplay drags it down so much more than basically the entirety of the game, especially when you're basically going to be playing the same character, hitting the same button for 40 hours, it gets pretty boring. But when they do decide to change things up, it feels exciting and fresh, which I wish that Replicant would have done a lot more instead of saving it for so many set pieces that are in the second half of the game. Now let's jump into Automata. Since I completed Automata in 2018 and played through it immediately after finished Replicant, connecting the dots is so much fun when they directly mention things from the first NieR. Automata once again asks you to play through the game 3 times with 2 endings and 1 true ending. Thankfully, in all of the routes you play as a new character, although one is kinda copied and pasted, but her gimmicks are really fun. Route A and B are the same main story but from different perspectives. Thankfully, the game adds a bunch of new side quests in Route B that flesh out the side and main cast and heightens the story a lot more. I also didn't bring up weapon stories in Replicant version 1.2 because they aren't in the original NieR, but they are pretty irrelevant to the story of Replicant overall. Automata weapon stories are very important to the main story and provide a lot more context, and I do ask that you read to understand the bigger picture. The side quests are also optional, but once again they are incredibly important. Compared to Replicant, Automata almost requires you to play through the side quests to enjoy the story. Other than that, Automata's story falls flat a lot more than Replicant's does, even if you're just counting Replicant's original Route A. Unlike Replicant, Automata's story isn't as direct either, with most of the other characters, even the third playable character, side and main backstory is in a play and drama CDs. Stuff like this is stuff that I don't really like in Automata. But unlike Replicant, it doesn't have a 45-minute lore dump through text. Depending on which way you prefer to digest character backstories through either plays or drama CDs that you have to go to outside of the game, or just have to read basically an entire novel to get backstories, is definitely up to you. With that being said, as much as I do like Automata, the slightly bigger cast does hurt this game. The main plot obviously focuses on 2B and 9S, but believe it or not, the character of 2B actually isn't focused on as much as you'd think. 2B's character is such a mixed bag in the community because some people think she's boring and others think she's just as engaging as 9S. 9S can be arguably considered the main character of Automata. I personally love 2B more than anyone on the main cast because of her development through the side quests, and understanding the context between certain events take place and why. The problem with Automata's development of its main character is the fact that you learn more about 2B while you're not actually playing her. In Route A, she has brief moments where she breaks her cold exterior to become a big sister to Operator 6-0 and is willing to go through anything just to be with 9S. 2B is the definition of the soldier, at least in US terms. The popular phrase she mentions, emotions are prohibited, aren't even something that Yorha put into place, but instead is a defense mechanism she put onto herself so she doesn't get too attached to 9S. She does get more dialogue in Route B, and at times it feels like she's an entirely different character. Her development in Route A and B feels a bit rushed, which is somewhat salvageable because of a small banter that Automata has. The banter is good, but it's not on par with Replicant because a lot of the characters that share interactions already know each other and are already on the same wavelength. This is challenged with 2B and 9S banter along with both of their interactions with their respective operators. A2 and Pod 042 are the closest you're going to get to the classic banter that Replicant offered. It's especially reminiscent of Weiss and Kaine interactions, which is elaborated on in the side content. Like I said, 9S could be argued to be the main character of Automata, but going into anything regarding him, at least without going into spoilers, would hurt the main plot as a whole. Some people also don't like 9S, which is understandable, and unlike 2B, his development is locked to a shorter route, which is Route C, because he shares most of the screen time with a second character. And the only thing that you can say to somewhat justify 9S's character is saying that he was just programmed this way. A2 has so little screen time in this game as well. She's the third playable character. She shares the box art with 2B and 9S, yet she has so little screen time in this game to the point she literally only has 2 side quests. It's really noticeable when you realize that 9S and 2B have a lot more side quests, although both of their own routes follow the same story, yet A2 only gets 2. And this is the same problem that 9S and her both have. They have to share a route with each other. And I don't think that's personally a bad thing. I just think that the way they handle it is not the best. A2, I believe, gets less playtime than 9S in Route C, which is incredibly disappointing. Another thing that Automata fails on is delivering its characters' development properly. The best example of this would be Operators 6.0 and 2.1.0 are both operators given to 2B and 9S respectively. They are only developed through side quests. Automata relies way too much on side content to fully develop its story and get the point across that it aims to deliver. And I'm not saying that you can't make a game without making side quests mandatory or fleshing out characters, but when it's to the level of depth that it adds so much detail and so much context to almost anything and everything that takes place in the main plot, it makes you wonder which one was developed first. I've been saving spoilers for the Automata part of the video primarily because it's the sequel to Replicant, but the biggest reason I want to do that is because the Devla and Popola models in NieR Automata are my favorite characters in all of the NieR series, and that's because of just how good their backstory is. But just like Replicant, it's locked behind a wall of text. That's not an entirely bad thing though. The biggest problem with Devla and Popola in this game is that your attachment to them relies on you knowing them through Replicant. And if you haven't played Replicant like me and a bunch of people didn't when we first played NieR Automata, you're not going to care about Devla and Popola in Route C when they die. And that's primarily because you don't know them. And the same thing goes for Emil, the same thing goes for pretty much Project Gestalt and half of anything that's referenced from the original NieR. And that's not only taking into account of the original NieR stuff. When Project Yorha does reveal that it was originally meant for the destruction of its own creation, it doesn't hit as hard as something as a Shadow Lord being the character you played as at the start of Replicant, because all of the side quests pretty much in Automata rely on you killing androids that are Yorha units, so it doesn't even really have that same impact that I believe Replicant carried. And that's not to say that NieR Automata can't hit those beats, but those beats can only really be reached when it does decide to take into all of the side content to make you fully get a picture of the story. That's where I think Automata fails with Replicant the most, is the fact that it tries to be way too undirect instead of being more direct with the way it develops its characters, its story, and gets its point across. Adam and Eve are the best example of this. Villains that are only fleshed out in the second part of the game, and only one of them really gets any real characterization. Now, the strongest part of Automata, as I'm pretty sure most people will agree, that has its limits way above Replicant, is its gameplay. Automata's gameplay is some of the best that I've ever seen, but similar to Replicant, it can get somewhat repetitive. The thing that keeps Automata's gameplay fresh is the fact that each route allows you to play as a separate character, and each character feels different enough to add variation, along with the fact that you can equip different weapons that don't feel as much as a chore to use compared to Replicant. And that's primarily because Platinum Games developed this game instead of assisting like they did in Replicant version 1.2. The gameplay in this game can be somewhat challenging if you're playing on hard mode, but if you're playing on normal where you have lock on, it's not incredibly challenging. But when the game does boost up or have those giant set piece moments in the gameplay, for example the Route C opening, but then again characters like 9S is entirely broken through the hacking mechanic, so is A2 later on. But that's perfectly fine to me, considering that hard mode in this game can be challenging outside of the literal intro of the game, because in Replicant the hard difficulty is just damage sponges, and it's not exactly rewarding to beat it outside of getting more drop rates and stuff like that. The last thing I want to compare both Replicant and Automata with is its visual styles. Replicant is a PS3 game upscaled to be on the PS4 because it's not a full-blown remake, but I do prefer the visual style that Replicant has, primarily because it's not as dreary and melancholy looking. This is a problem that Automata has, in my opinion, is the filter that it continued to use for its entire runtime, and at times the game can look amazing, but at others it can be incredibly draining to the eyes, but that could just be me. Automata also does struggle from very low res textures at times, but like I said, I did play the original version of Automata and not Game of the Year or Yorha edition. In conclusion, I'd say that both NieR games need to be experienced because both games are fantastic, but if I had to pick one over the other, I'd pick NieR Automata. The main reason for this is because as a game, Automata I think is better because of its gameplay and a way that it keeps itself fresh throughout a 40-hour campaign. It has new moments and set pieces for almost every route that are memorable. Replicant struggles by not doing any of that, and like I said, because it's not a full remake, it does hold itself back just a little bit. Replicant does have better characters and music in my opinion, along with the story, but that can't really be considered when it's supposed to be a game. It's not something like Telltale where you're only supposed to focus on the story, but as a game, Replicant is very mediocre, at least if you strip down the story and take away almost anything that makes Replicant enjoyable. But if you have Automata, you can at least enjoy Automata if you take into account of all the side content and take away the gameplay, or vice versa. That's the reason I personally pick Automata over Replicant. But like I said, I think both games are incredibly fantastic and both are incredibly memorable, and when they do hit those emotional moments, they hit you. But there are some moments in both games that drag on or feel very repetitive or monotonous. One does it better and one keeps it fresh, and that's why I personally would go with NieR Automata.